white shark.
Yes, I am.
Are you excited?
So excited, thrilled.
Yes. It's going to be a very eventful
It will be.
video. Oi. Hello. Hi.
Oh, hey.
Hello, Jaala.
Hello, Pat.
You going to come down here and join us?
Yeah.
I like the cage. But you swim without the cage. I do swim with great whites without the cage.
That's terrifying.
It's fun. For you it is. And just for everyone who's watching as well, Jaala is our new team member.
Yes.
She's the new member of Manta Marine Podcast TV and the
Lovely
Manta
to meet
Marine
you.
Podcast. So everybody welcome our new member of the team.
Thank
Welcome,
you.
Jaala.
Cheers.
We're happy to have you.
Thank you
I
very
think
much.
we're lucky to have you.
Appreciate you guys having me on the show.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Yes.
Oh, you will be down there. Yeah, so you can talk about this beautiful species. Can't you talk about it? I know nothing about them.
Not enough. Not as much as you know.
Yes. Okay. One second. Ready or not? Here I come.
Just on the way.
Yes. Hello. Hello. Haven't got my shield. Your shield. Cage. I think we'll be alright. We'll be standing out here with him.
Okay.
So what's his name first of all? Let's call him George. George? Everyone would have called him Bruce or George. So let's call him George. George it is. It is. Yeah. So just for Jaala, because she's just joined the team, we'll just go over a couple of things that we went through last week. Yes. On parts 1 and 2. So, great white's teeth, they're quite unique to other sharks' teeth, because they are that triangle shape. So you can see here how triangular they are. Like all the dangerous sharks, they do have serrated teeth. So they have the little serrates in them. So these teeth are how they are shaped. The only difference here, because it's obviously like not real, they don't have the serrates on this particular model, but they are serrated. Now, the interesting thing, Jaala, great whites have 5 rows of teeth. Okay, what happens when a tooth goes bad, or they lose a tooth, or anything like that? The teeth will roll over this way. So it's like they're on a bit of a conveyor belt. So they roll this way. So this one, if the shark has an injured tooth in the front here, has lost a tooth, this will go under, and the next row will come out.
So another set's coming.
Yes.
How many sets are there?
So they have 5 rows.
Oh,
They have approximately 42 teeth on each row, approximately. So they have approximately at any one time around the 300 mark of teeth in the mouth. Over the course of their lifetime, great whites will go through, which means they will lose anywhere up to 30,000.
That's a lot of teeth.
It is a lot of teeth.
All we lose is our baby teeth and grow out teeth.
Pretty
Is
much.
that
I mean,
cool?
how cool would it be though if we were the same and we
Have the same
grew teeth back?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, and they do live for about 70 years as well.
Wow.
It was estimated previously that they lived for an approximate 25 years, but further studies have been done on great whites, and they do actually live for around about 70 years.
That's like a human lifetime.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Wow.
Basically, can outlive some humans. With the great white, this is what I was talking about last week. Shania, you will remember this. I was talking about the colouring. Yeah. So just for Jaala, and we did have a little bit of wind that day too, so I just want to reiterate a couple of little things. The colouring of the great white. So I'm just going to come next to you there, Jaala. Sorry, darling. So the colouring of the great white. So this is what I was talking about with the jaggering, like that sort of jagged blending into the white. So do you know why that is, Jaala?
No, I'm not exactly sure.
So why they've got that, so they've got a complete underbelly, which is white, and the grey. Okay, so this particular shading and the way it is shaded is so they can blend into the coastline. Because they do a lot of their feeding around the coastline, so even though you might not see them, might not see them, but they're around. So you could be swimming in the coastline in seaweed or seagrasses or a reef.
So they're trying to camouflage.
It's a camouflage. They camouflage in.
Camouflage effect.
Yep. So it's like a camouflage effect, and great whites are very, very good at it. Very good at it.
Is there any other sharks that can camouflage into the coastline, or is it just great whites?
Great whites are predominantly the ones that do blend into the coastline. Tiger sharks can, but your great white is the one who's more prominent and the more dominant one to do that.
Yep.
Because great whites, do you know when great whites prefer to feed?
No.
Would you say all the time?
Yeah, pretty much probably.
Yeah. Their preferred feeding time is the first 2 hours of sunlight. First 2 hours of the early morning.
Wow. So they don't have like breakfast, lunch and dinner like we do?
Not particularly, no, they don't have particular but their main feeding time is that first 2 hours of the early morning. And do you know why?
Why is that?
It's because the visibility is lower, so they can't be seen coming.
That's
Their prey can't see them coming.
There you go. That makes a lot of sense.
It does.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the sunlight's coming up, the visibility is a lot lower. These guys feed around in that first 2 hours of the sunlight for that very reason. So that's when great whites prefer to feed.
Yeah.
Is around them.
There you go.
Yeah. So they are, like all sharks. You've got your gills and your pectoral fins and your dorsal and your caudal fin, your rear dorsal and your tail fin. And the males, like all sharks, have two claspers.
Yeah.
Which is two penises.
Yes, I was going to say.
Yes. So, look, I chose to specialise in great whites and dolphins.
Yep.
But I chose to specialise in great whites because ever since I was a kid, they've absolutely amazed me.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to know?
How do we protect the great whites in our local waters?
How do you protect them?
Yeah.
Good question. The great whites previously were on the endangered list. I don't know whether you guys are aware that they were previously on the endangered list. But the great white now is protected. I'm not sure if you guys know, but I'm just going to say that all mammals in Australian oceans, these guys are not a mammal, they're a fish, but all mammals in the Australian oceans are in fact protected. These guys are protected under the Australian laws. So that is how they are being protected from becoming extinct. So the lowest you can be on this list is extinct.
Yeah.
Then there's endangered, and then there's vulnerable.
Yeah.
Great whites, since they've been protected, have now moved up to vulnerable.
That's good.
So we've managed to move them from that next step down, which was extinction. So they've gone from being endangered and they've progressed up to vulnerable. What we're working on doing is getting them off that list completely.
Yeah.
These guys were hunted back in the 80s, 70s and 80s. They were hunted quite predominantly for their teeth, for their jaws, because their jaws are worth a lot of money.
Do you know if they still are?
There has been illegal fishing for them. There is a 5-year maximum of 5-year imprisonment now for catching and killing a great white. There is hefty fines as well. So we are on the right track to have these guys completely off any list. So their teeth are very valuable, and this is why they were being hunted. And they very, very quickly went from being on no list to being endangered.
That just shows when we protect them as
We
they
do.
are a
We do.
vulnerable species.
Yeah. And being an apex predator, what we're going to do too is, like, over the time, is we're going to do a show on sharks and our ecosystems. And sharks of any species, not just these guys, are extremely important to our ecosystem.
Yeah.
And when we do that show, I'll go through those reasons why. But these guys being an apex predator are one of the most important.
They're the alpha of the ocean.
They really are.
Aren't
They really are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've had your orca try and take over their position, but haven't done it yet.
Not yet.
No.
Now, you see in videos and all that sort of stuff, like sharks, they sort of have the eye up and they'll be swimming along. What is that?
Like this, so it doesn't matter what side they're on. So it might be that eye or it might be that eye.
Yeah.
So what they're actually doing when they're swimming along the surface and they've got their eye up and they're looking up, it's called spy hopping.
Mm-hmm.
What spy hopping is a form of hunting. It's one of their hunting techniques.
Mm-hmm.
So what they're actually doing is they're hunting this. They're spying the surface to see what's there.
Yeah.
So if they've sensed something in that area and they've come along and they're having a look at it, they're trying to see what it is. So they're trying to work out if there's prey there or not.
Yeah.
So that's what they're doing, and it's a form of hunting that they use, and it's called spy hopping. Yeah. So that's called. So when you have, we actually have, just so everyone can see what it is, we have a video just in the corner of this video, so you can see great white spy hopping, so you can actually see what Shania asked about and what I'm telling you about. So that's called spy hopping. So what you can see on your screen is spy hopping.
And I'm just wondering, how do we identify great whites compared to the others
Other
in
great
the
whites?
ocean?
Other sharks?
Other great
Yeah,
whites and sharks.
Yep.
Their swimming style.
Yeah. So all sharks, well, they're a fish. So all sharks, their tail is used to propel them. So when their tail is moving this way to the left, these muscles stretch and these muscles contract. So it's just like that. So they move exactly the same as any other shark, okay, and any other fish, because they are a fish. Okay.
Fish.
They're a fish. Yep. Great whites generally tend to have a much larger dorsal fin, and the shape of this shark's dorsal fin is pretty much correct for a great white.
Yeah.
So they do have, if you have a look at the shaping of this, you can pretty much tell. So great whites are a little bit more curved. There is one shark in the ocean actually that is quite often mistaken for a great white if it's seen on the surface, and that's the basking shark. Mm-hmm. Now, to tell the difference between a basking shark and a great white, basking shark, their fin is much wider than a great white. So try not to mix up the fin of a great white and a basking shark. So if you want to tell whether it's a basking shark or whether it's a great white, have a look at the dorsal fin. So if it doesn't have that curvature that the great white has, and it's wider, it's a basking shark. Completely harmless. So that's how you tell the difference between great whites and other species of sharks. Very interesting question, because you actually wanted to know, you asked me just then, what's the difference? How can you tell the difference? Can you tell the difference between great white to great white? The answer is yes, you can.
And how so?
I'm going to show you. So, the great white, try not to donk my noggin. The great white, around here, around the gills, the white on them is different on every shark. So the depth of the white is different on every grey white. So just say for argument's sake, IMAX out there, his white goes all the way up here. Bruce, on the other hand, might have his white colouring come up to here.
So they have different identification.
Exactly. So the depth of the white, and what I mean by depth, I don't mean colour, I mean by how far up the gill it goes, tells which shark is which. So I could go out there and I could say, that's IMAX, that's Lucy, or that's Bruce.
There you go.
Just by looking at that.
Just like that.
Yeah.
Simple
So
identification.
something very, very simple. All sharks have something on them, or a part of their body, that just differentiates that shark from that shark. So each one of them has their own little identification mark. So your great white, if you want to look at, if you're out cage diving with Calypso Star, or wherever you may be in the world, we have Calypso Star here in Port Lincoln in South Australia, very, very good company to go with. If you're out there and you are looking at sharks and you see a shark go by, and then you see another shark come by and you're like, oh, is that the same shark? Have a look. Have a look at the depth of the lake. Does it go up here? Does it go here? Have a look at, take notice of the shark when it goes past. Have a look at the white here. And then if another shark comes along, have a look at the white. And you'll be able to tell whether it's a different shark or not. So that's how you tell. Females are generally, as a rule, bigger than the males. To tell how to tell the length of a shark, do you know how to measure a shark?
No.
Without actually getting out a tape measure? No.
How would you do that?
What you do is you measure from the dorsal fin to the tail and double it. So just say the dorsal to the tail is 3 meters. Double it and you've got a 6 meter shark.
Well, there you go. That's pretty
And that's on
every day.
That's on every shark, not just the great white. But that's how you tell how big a shark is. So when you're in the cage and you're cage diving, or for me, when I'm beside a great white swimming with it, I look at the fins. And I go, okay, there to there is this, and there, this is a 6 meter or a 7 meter shark.
Wow.
This is not 7 meters.
Another question a lot of people ask, and I know you get asked a lot, is why can't you keep great whites in captivity?
We did touch on this last week.
We did.
But again, we had a lot of wind in that video, and I'm very sorry, guys. So I'm going to touch on a few things that we did go through there. Great whites are the only species of shark you cannot keep in captivity. The reason why is when great whites are in captivity and they're in an aquarium, they become disoriented. What they start to do then, when they become disoriented, is they start to bang into the walls on the side of the aquarium.
That's terrible.
Once they start doing that, they will stop feeding, so they won't eat. And what they'll eventually do is they'll keep banging and banging and banging till they injure themselves and they won't feed and they will die.
And knock themselves
I think Japan once had a great white in captivity and it lived for 3 days.
Wow.
Before it died.
Do you think, is there ever a way that you could keep
No.
a great white in captivity?
No.
Not at all?
Look, I have theories, but
You're not going to leave them out?
no. But it's not to say that I'm right either.
Exactly.
Great whites cannot be kept in captivity because they are used to swimming long distances and swimming at deeper depths.
Yeah.
Okay. This is the reason why an aquarium is never going to be big enough, because they're used to swimming faster and longer.
Yeah.
Much bigger spaces is what they're used to.
Yeah.
Now sharks grow, and any marine animal grows to suit its environment.
Yeah.
So a great white is not exactly built for captivity.
Yeah.
They're a large shark. So if you take a shark that's of a massive size and you put it into captivity, this ain't going to work.
Yeah, no.
So great whites, the reason they cannot be kept in captivity is because they become disoriented. Now this disorientation is because they are so used and they are built to move fast and long distances. This is why they cannot and never will be able to be kept in captivity. This is the reasons why.
Interesting. There you go. I'm just wondering how they also reproduce.
Reproduce?
Yeah.
Like all other sharks, they reproduce they give birth to live young. We did go through this last week in the last video, but Jaala wasn't with us then, so I'll just quickly go through it again for her now for her question. So they do breed exactly the same way as other sharks. The interesting thing about great whites is we don't actually know where their breeding grounds are. What we do know is they breed at much deeper depths than other sharks, but we don't actually know where it is.
And what do shark eggs usually look like? Have you...
Great whites give birth to live young.
Live young.
So as I said in the last video, they give birth to anywhere between 2 to 12 pups at a time. The reason we say 2 to 12 is that number's dynamic. And the reason it's dynamic is because great whites, the pups inside the mother, practice what is called oofery. And what it is, they will eat each other. The stronger pups will eat the weaker pups.
So almost cannibals
They are.
to one another.
They are.
Wow.
Great whites will eat other great whites.
That's very interesting.
So the reason we say between 2 to 12 is dynamic. And that's the reason why. One of the reasons why.
Very interesting.
So when a great white is pregnant, and they are pregnant for 11 months, we don't actually know how many they're going to give birth to. Like they might start off with, say, for a number, 8 pups in the tummy, but they might only give birth to 6 of those pups or 4 of those pups because the stronger pups have eaten the weaker pups. Yeah, so it's called oofery. And the great white
Survives one of the strongest.
It is. It is, and that's why we do have strong grey whites.
Another one I asked about is their breaching, like how high and what's the speed of breaching that they
Yep.
can go.
Yep. So great whites, as you guys have probably seen, great whites breach. So breaching is like literally jumping out of the water. Like it might be for any number of reasons. It might be like they want to regulate their body temperature. So they want when they do that, they do multiple breaching, and that's called thermal regulation. Might be they want to get a seal, so they'll breach. Great whites, when they do this breach, are travelling at 25 miles per hour.
Wow.
That's very fast.
Yeah.
It's
That
extremely
is-
quick. Yep. So they do breach at 25 miles per hour, and they breach to heights of anywhere between 10 to 15 feet.
Wow.
It's about 3 of us
Yeah.
combined.
So they do. Their speed is pivotal in how high they jump. So you'll see them. I don't know whether you've actually seen the underwater to the surface breach. So under the water, they're actually coming up, and they are moving at one hell of a speed. So they've got 25 miles per hour, and their tail is like whipping. So they use their tail as a whip.
Very powerful.
It's a very powerful tail, and they use their tail to propel them through and push them up. So when you see great whites breaching, coming up for a breach, is you'll see them when they get to the surface, like a push, and they do this. You'll see them do this. That's because that's to push them up.
It gives them the force.
It gives them the force to get up, and it's just like, whoop, and they're up. And a great white can breach 10 to 15 feet in the air. They have been known at times to breach onto boats. So they will breach onto a boat.
Speaking of which, on my boats, why do sharks go up to boats?
Why do great whites go?
Yeah, or great whites.
Yeah, great whites, any shark, but mainly great whites because they're extremely acute. Their electro location is extremely acute, as I've said in the past. With great
Yeah.
whites, more acute than any other shark through the ampulla lorenzini in the nose, in the tip of their snout. They're more acute. Now the reason great whites will go up to a boat is because they pick up on the electric fields being put out by the boat.
Can they also sense if there's like fish or something on that boat?
They'll
like,
smell it.
yeah.
They'll smell it. But it's not only fishing boats or things that they'll go up to, they will go up to any boat. And it's because that their electrolocation is picking it up, and they pick up on the electric field that's actually put out by that boat. So that's why they will go to a boat.
Would their electrolocation be affected by boats' oils and fuels? And why so?
Great whites are extremely intelligent, okay, which I'm going to explain in a minute, just how intelligent they really are. Great whites generally tend to stay away from anywhere where there is something that can harm them. When I said before great whites will eat other great whites, if a great white smells another great white's blood, I explained this in last week in episode 2 as well, but again I'm going to explain it for Jaala. If a great white smells another great white's blood, that great white will swim away very quickly from that area. So the great white is extremely intelligent in the fact that if they sense that there's something there that's going to hurt them, they're going. You won't see them for dust.
And they become very territorial.
Very territorial, which brings me to the next point. Just going to grab some supply.
Yeah.
You'd like to have a chat between one another for a moment?
Yes. Are you learning some new things, Jaala?
I really am. It's very interesting how much there is of a broad spectrum about great whites and how wonderful the ocean is, and truly being able to accommodate these beautiful creatures. And I think that we should be really looking after these beautiful creatures, especially as they're moving up now to being vulnerable from endangered, as Paris was saying.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
We just need to protect them. And it's, you've got to stop hurting species and make them go in their endangered list. And it's just
Definitely. And you think we should be looking after their marine environments as well?
We all need to. We all need to
Definitely.
get back together.
We all need to take our part.
Hello, I'm back. I'm back. I'm back. I have some things here because I have something very exciting to tell you. We're talking about territoriality.
Yes.
Great whites are very territorial when there's feed around. So they will stay around the area when they have food around that area. Apart from that, they're nomadic.
What does nomadic mean?
Nomadic means they will move along. They will move. Great whites are not rogue. So great whites will not rogue along the coastline.
And what do you mean by rogue?
Rogue is what tiger sharks generally do. Tiger sharks will rogue along the coastline between certain areas, which I will explain when we talk about tigers. Whereas the great white will be nomadic and literally move away from that area. So a great white might be here in Neptune Islands. There's no food there. And the next thing you might find them in South Africa.
And why is that?
Food.
Food.
Food
Mainly
source.
food.
If their food source is on the move, they're on the move. If there's no food there, they're going looking for it.
Yeah.
So even though their main feeding time is that first 2 hours of the morning, they do feed through the day as well, but that is their main feeding time. Springtime, which is now, great whites around the world will, right now at Neptune Islands, if you go out cage diving with Calypso Star, you will not find, or it is less likely to find a great white out there. Because during spring, 20% of the population of great whites in the world will move to just off the Hawaiian Islands. The rest of them will move to the middle of the Pacific, a remote area in the middle of the Pacific. This area is known as the Great White Cafe.
Oh, so they've figured out where it is. You were telling me a little while ago that you marine biologists didn't know where this was.
I'm going to explain.
So they're not having a
Correct. They probably do make a latte or two.
Have a cup of tea.
Yes. So,
Trying a fish cake.
fish paste.
Fish cake.
Yeah. We could keep going. Correct. We now know why.
There you go.
We didn't know for a long time where it was or why they went there. But I'm going to tell you now, because we now know. I'm just going to show everyone for the camera and then I'll show you guys. So, great whites will go to the middle of the Pacific, known as the Great White Cafe. This is between the Hawaiian Islands and Baja. So we now know the exact location.
Wow.
So it is
really
between the Hawaiian Islands and the Baja, in the middle of the Pacific.
That's really cool. That only know.
That is here. 20% will hang around the Hawaiian Islands, which is around here. The rest of them will go here, which is the Great White Cafe in the middle of the Pacific. So, just for you girls, 20% of them will be here. The rest of them will be here. This is the Great White Cafe. So they will move their way to the Great White Cafe.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Feed here, feed here.
Wow.
And that's basically where they all end up.
This is where they congregate.
Do they like fill their bellies up completely and then they just go away again from that place, or?
Why do you think great whites make such a journey to the middle of the Pacific?
I have no idea. I couldn't think of anything. Why?
Why on heaven's earth would a great white in South Australia or California go here?
Maybe to have a social life.
Have a social life?
That works, yeah. Socialise with their friends. Maybe have long distance overseas friendships.
Breeding. One stage it was thought that they went there to breed. And then at another stage it was thought that they went there to give birth. Neither are correct. There's been expeditions to the area. Tagged sharks, tagged male sharks. 120 of those tagged male sharks were seen bobbing around the surface.
Sort of like the bobbing, like little sea lions will do, sort of thing, or different
Up and down.
Feeding for plankton. The females were found to be diving to deeper depths of around 360 to 390.
Wow.
Interesting.
So, still, again, you tell me why they want to go there. Do you know what?
No, I'd love to find out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When food becomes a little less resourceful around the areas that they do feed, great whites have figured something out. They've gone, hang on. The Great White Cafe, this remote part of the Pacific, is the hub where all marine life must move through at least once.
Well, there you go.
So they've all been there, all marine
This is
life.
where they must move through.
Wow.
Great whites, I was saying how smart they were. Great whites have figured this out.
Wow.
But this is the hub of where marine life must travel. It is the biggest traffic area of marine life in the world.
Marine alley.
This is why they go to feed there.
Wow. There you go.
So we now know from tracking devices and from the expedition that was recently done there why this is the Great White Cafe, and this is exactly where it is, between Hawaiian Islands and Baja.
There you go.
We're very excited as marine biologists to actually know why they go there and where it is. Because
Yeah,
we didn't
that's
actually
pretty
know.
cool.
But the only thing that is still unknown is where their breeding grounds are.
Hopefully you find out soon.
Exactly. See, one of the reasons why this area remains unknown for quite some time is because it's so remote that expeditions, it's hard for scientists and marine biologists to take an expedition there, but it has been done, and we now know exactly what's going on. And great whites, incredibly smart to
How
work
do
it out.
great whites sense their prey?
Electrolocation. So they pick up an electric field of prey. Okay? Great whites have the ability to be able to pick up electric field from a buried marine animal in close range.
Wow.
That's how acute it is. So they pick it up through electrolocation. Great whites also use the magnetic field, all sharks actually, not just the great white, use the magnetic field of the earth that is combined with the electrolocation, the electric fields.
It's almost like they've got a sixth sense.
Yeah. So they use the magnetic field of the earth and the electric fields in the ocean, which combine together, and that's how they find their way around.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's how they find one another as well. Yep.
Extremely smart shark. But that is the Great White Cafe. So if you ever hear about it, now you know what it is.
Yeah.
And where it is.
Yes. There you go. Another thing I want to ask you, the size of a great white. Now, I know there's a prehistoric shark called the Megalodon. How big is is Megalodon compared to great white shark? And how much of it shrunk?
Let me show you. The Megalodon, as we know, is the prehistoric great white. Just for Jaala's benefit, I spoke about what we know now as the modern day great white. Do you know how long our modern day great white has been swimming around our oceans for?
Over 16 million years.
16 million years.
Yeah.
This is the Megalodon.
Wow. And we don't know if we have that prehistoric creature still deep down in the ocean. do
Exactly. Less than 10% of our oceans have been explored. So how do we know what's in the deeper depths? Because we can't get to them.
we? No, because there's no soundproof
Exactly.
device that could go down
So-
that far.
Just so we all know how big the Megalodon was, the predecessor of the great white. The top is the Megalodon, who, I might add, could grow in excess of 60 feet.
Wow.
And this
that?
is
About 10
80
great whites put together?
Exactly. This
Yeah.
is our modern day great white. The one underneath.
Wow.
It looks tiny compared to Meg.
The bite force of the great white, as I said last week in our show, is 18,519 newtons, which is about 4,000 pounds. That's the bite force of our modern day great white.
Wow.
What was the estimate bite force of Meg?
Do you want to know?
Yeah.
Between 102,500 to 182,000 newtons.
5 times the amount of a great white.
So you're looking at 20,000 pounds, in excess of 20,000 pounds.
That's
PSI per bite.
That's crazy. And what would we do if the Megalodon is still out there?
Right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend swimming. Even I, as someone who swims with these,
You don't think they would be
I
as friendly as
would
a
not
great
swim
white?
with a Megalodon.
No?
It's like putting us in the backyard with a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Yeah.
It'd be like finding a Tyrannosaurus Rex in your backyard.
Well, yeah, it would be.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to go out and play.
Exactly. I certainly would not.
And it's already terrifying enough that you swim with them without the cage.
A lot of people do find it terrifying that I swim with great whites, and our cameraman Vernon has actually swum with great whites with me.
It takes a lot of guts to
It
do
does.
that.
I'll stick to the cage, thanks.
Yeah, same here, definitely.
We were in Perth once, and the shark alarm went off, and instead of swimming towards the surface, we swam over to the great white. I think everyone thought we were a little bit mad, but
And no fear.
no fear. No, don't fear them.
No.
That is my point of doing these videos about the great white, because I want to educate people on the great white. I want people to know what I know about great whites. I don't want you to fear them, but at the same time, I want you to be aware of them, respect them, but don't, unless you understand them, don't swim without a cage. Go in a cage if you are going with a great white. Go in a cage. I don't recommend you guys doing what I do or what Vernon does.
Can they sense fear as
Yes.
soon as you're in the water,
Yes.
and would they be more
Yes.
likely to attack?
Yes. Yes. And that's that field that you put off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we all have electromagnetic fields.
We do
within
put off
us,
an electric field when we have fear.
and that would be fear.
Exactly what they pick up.
And do you have anything
Yeah.
fascinating about the great white to tell us?
Yeah. Did you know that great whites are a lamnidae mackerel shark? They're lamnid.
What does that mean?
Do you guys know?
No.
Do you know?
No.
Paris?
I know.
Oh.
Would you like to tell us?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, all right. I'll share it. Lamnid means. I'm going to explain it like this. We are humans, so we are mammals. Right? Our body temperature is 37 degrees. right? Now that basal body temperature remains at 37 degrees, well, unless you sink. But that remains 37 degrees, regardless of temperature outside, right? And the way we keep that regulated is through eating and that sort of thing, right? Yeah. So we are what?
We can constantly regulate.
Warm-blooded?
And warm-blooded?
We're warm-blooded. As a fish, you would think that great whites are... What a fish? Yeah. So you would think that as a fish, great whites are cold-blooded.
Yeah.
No.
Are they warm-blooded?
They are much more complex than that.
What are they?
Great whites are far more complex than that. And the only other species, or one of the only other species apart from these lamnid sharks, that is lamnid, is a tuna. I'm going to explain what lamnid is. Lamnid means they have what is called the ability, they have a counter current heat exchange.
Okay.
What counter current heat exchange means is they are able to regulate their body temperature to make it warmer than the water they're in.
Wow, so they're almost thermoregulating to the water.
It's thermoregulation too. Great whites, I'm going to use some examples. Just say they're in a body of water that is 12 degrees. They can regulate their body temperature through this counter current heat exchange so that their body temperature is 10 to 15 degrees higher.
Wow.
So if they're in a body of water that is 12 degrees, they can make their body temperature up to 22 degrees or 27 degrees. So they can raise it between that 10 to 15 degrees higher.
Yeah, I wish humans could do that.
I wish we could do that because when we get in the water we shiver, right? So, I like the sharks. Now,
Is that your drawing?
that is not my drawing, that is our cameraman. So, they are able to regulate that. And that is called counter current heat exchange. Do you want to know how it's done?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I'll use our friend behind us. Great whites will do this by run through the muscle in their body. Okay?
Yeah.
What happens then is this regulation of heat that is running through the muscle in their body charges up what is called a white muscle in their body, which is around about here. That white muscle, that charged up white muscle,
Yeah.
stores that heat so they can impact at sudden high speeds in cold water.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
So it's like a heat storing,
Yeah.
and it's called counter current heat exchange.
Basically, we've got a heat packed in there.
Yeah.
They're like a tuna. Tuna is exactly the same.
Wow.
So these guys are what is called lamnid. So if you ever hear of lamnidae, or you ever hear me speaking of lamnidae,
Yeah.
that is exactly what I'm talking about. These guys are a lamnidae mackerel shark.
There you go.
So these guys are part of the mackerel shark family, as is the mako.
Wow.
Okay, the mako is part of the mackerel family as well. These guys have that ability to regulate their body temperature. A fish, your basic fish, only has a body temperature a few degrees higher than the body of water that they're in, so they can't do it. But the great white is able to survive in hot, cold, because he or she can regulate her body temperature through the muscle that runs through their body, and the white muscle, it's like a heated core. So that allows that, it's like a storage of heat.
Yeah.
So when they're in colder water, they're able to have that burst.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
And that's how they do it.
Wow, that's actually pretty damn cool.
Yeah.
How it, wow.
Yeah.
That's good to know it.
Yeah. Whereas reptiles are cold-blooded.
Yeah.
Their body temperature is determined by the outside temperature.
Yeah.
Not them.
That's pretty cool.
And that's only great whites.
Great whites are part of the ones that. That's very true. These guys are extremely
Incredible.
They're streamlined. They're very streamlined.
They're very incredible.
But great whites, I've got no words for them, to be honest. Like, I've specialised in them for years. I've been around them for years. And as far as a shark goes, they're one of the most fascinating in the fact that they are able to regulate their temperatures like this. And that they have this ability to regulate their body temperatures and hold this heat in that white muscle. It's like a core.
Yeah.
It's like a heat core.
Yeah.
It's like a hot water bottle, like a heating pad.
Even if they washed up on sand, how long would they keep their heat?
If they washed up on sand, they would be dead
Within
pretty soon.
minutes? Or?
Sharks are a fish, so they require dissolved oxygens to breathe. So I think for anyone who's seen our dissolved oxygens video, great whites and any shark uses dissolved oxygens to breathe. They're exactly the same, and it works exactly the same way as your garden variety fish. So they are, I want to reiterate, because we have heard someone call a great white a mammal,
Yes.
which Shania corrected.
Yes,
She was in the area
I
at the
couldn't
time.
believe it. I had to.
Great whites and any shark are not a mammal.
They're
They
a
are
fish.
a fish. These guys are at the top of the shark game.
Yes.
They are neither warm-blooded
All cold.
nor cold. They are much more than that, much more complex than that.
Sorry,
So, you go.
Do they come into our local waters such as Fisheries Bay?
Port Lincoln?
Port Lincoln.
Port Lincoln is one of the hubs of great whites. As I explained in the last episodes, wasn't it? Last episodes I explained that the large abundance of great whites, the largest congregation of great whites is actually in South Africa, near the Dire Islands. Now that is called Shark Alley. That's where your biggest and the most abundant of great whites are. However, Port Lincoln is another home of the great white. So yes, you will see them around fisheries, which is here, as Jaala will show. So they will come around the likes of Fisheries Bay. Surfers have seen them around Sleaford. They are everywhere along the Eyre Peninsula coast. Adelaide has them. Adelaide had a whale carcass recently washed up near the pier.
And there's a lot of them around KI.
Yes.
Kangaroo Island.
Yes. And great whites were feeding on this carcass, and the great whites were literally next to the pier.
Really?
So
Yeah.
they are throughout South Australia.
Yes.
They are very, very prominent. They are as prominent here in South Australia, and particularly Port Lincoln, as what they are in South Africa. But South Africa does have the higher rate and the higher congregation of great whites. Do you know why?
No, what's that? Why
Because
do they
isn't it
have
because
one?
our waters?
No.
No.
The great whites gather around the Dire Islands, which is known as Shark Alley,
Oh, yes.
because that is the closest area to Seal Island in South Africa, which seals and sea lions are their main food source. So they stick close to their main food source.
Is it with great whites as well? As I've heard you talk about be a right temperature of the water for them to live?
That used to be a speculation until us as marine biologists came across their counter-current heat exchange, until there was further depths, because we found that they were adapting to hotter water. Because as a rule, great whites are an Australian shark.
Yes.
If you want to get really down and technical.
Yeah.
And they started moving from the colder waters of South Australia because they were first seen in South Australia originally, as where they used to be in more abundance.
Yeah.
So they are South Aussie, really. But great whites have learned to adapt, and as marine biologists, this was never really understood as to how can they adapt. They're cold-blooded, and we've since come across no, they're not.
Yeah.
We've since had studies and studied that they are, in fact, neither or.
Right.
So they have this thermoregulation, they have this counter-current heat exchange, which is what I was just talking about. So that's why they can live in other bodies of water.
There you go.
But they do prefer cold water.
There you go.
Well,
We're pretty close to Antarctica, so
yes.
there would be quite a lot
Yeah.
around here.
Yeah. And we do have our sea lions and our seals and all that here. So they do hang around South Australia.
So like this is
Quite a lot.
give me a second.
Yes. Oh my gosh, she's getting something. Oh, she's just picked up something.
She's grabbing something.
Like this little guy.
She's picked up a sea lion.
Cute.
All right. You know what we're gonna do? We're going to go out and we're going to swim with the sea lions in the next few weeks, and we're going to do our video. We're going to do our show about the sea lions out on the water with the sea lions. So we're going to be interacting with the sea lions and doing a video, a show at the same time.
You see these little guys live in action. And I think
that about wraps it up for this week.
Yes, now we have a little part to this.
Yes,
It's
we
not
do.
part of part 4. It's going to be called
How to avoid a shark attack.
And that will be the end series of our great white shark.
Yes, and then we will be taking you out, and a show will be done wholly and solely with the great white.
Yes, it will.
See you guys.
See ya.